Welcome to Skytech-Lens. In early 2025, a diplomatic crisis erupted along the U.S. Canada border, sending shockwaves from Washington to Alaska. In a move few expected, Canada, America's usually reliable neighbor, choked off the main land route to Alaska. This wasn't a military blockade but a bureaucratic and economic stranglehold. The Trump administration, focused on trade battles elsewhere, was blindsided. Canada's actions came as a cascade of provincial and federal measures: new tolls, strict inspections, and a unified Canadian front. For President Trump, this was an audacious challenge to American dominance, one that lacked a clear villain or simple narrative. Prime Minister Trudeau framed it as a regulatory recalibration, but the White House saw it as economic aggression. Nowhere was the shock felt more than in Alaska, where the once reliable highway lifeline was suddenly squeezed. The crisis dominated headlines, forcing Americans to look north in disbelief. To grasp the crisis, you need to understand the Alaska Highway's vital role. While most cargo arrives by sea, the highway is essential for time-sensitive goods, fresh food, urgent supplies, and critical equipment for Alaska's oil and gas industry. When machinery fails, waiting for a barge isn't an option. Road transport keeps the state running. The highway is also a lifeline for families, tourists, and those needing medical care in the lower 48. Heavy tolls and delays severed this connection, leaving Alaskans isolated and vulnerable. Built during World War II as a symbol of U.S. Canada cooperation, the highway's weaponization felt like a betrayal of a long-standing pact. The crisis turned a symbol of friendship into a point of bitter contention. It exposed just how dependent Alaska is on Canada's goodwill. Canada's response to Trump's tariff threats was swift and unified. British Columbia led with tolls on U.S. trucks and bans on certain American goods. Ontario imposed surcharges on electricity exports, hitting U.S. markets hard. The Yukon halted government purchases from U.S. companies and restricted contracts. Ottawa backed these moves with tighter land transit regulations, citing safety and environmental concerns. Border inspections became ordeals, creating a choke point as effective as a blockade. By spreading actions across provinces and industries, Canada ensured the pain was felt widely in the U.S. The message was clear: threaten Canada, and you'll face a united, painful response. The friendly neighbor had sharp elbows, and wasn't afraid to use them. Washington couldn't easily dismiss or bully this coordinated front. The crisis was triggered by President Trump's aggressive America First trade agenda. In early 2025, he threatened a sweeping 25% tariff on all Canadian imports, expecting Canada to fold. The White House dismissed warnings that Canada might retaliate in unexpected ways. Trump's rhetoric, branding Canada as a trade cheat and Trudeau as weak, inflamed Canadian public opinion. Instead of dividing Canada, the threat united its leaders and citizens. Canada's robust response caught the U.S. off guard, turning Trump's leverage against him. The tariff threat, meant to force concessions, instead sparked a powerful coalition of resistance. The Alaska Highway crisis was a direct result of this miscalculation. It showed the risks of relying on brute force over diplomatic nuance. As tensions rose, Americans realized an uncomfortable truth: there's no treaty guaranteeing U.S. access to Alaska via Canada. The Alaska Highway, built by the U.S. Army, is on Canadian soil and subject to Canadian law. Decades of cooperation created the illusion of guaranteed access. But goodwill isn't a legal right. Canadian officials emphasized their sovereign authority to regulate transit. The situation echoed the 2021 cruise ship ban, which also exposed Alaska's reliance on Canadian cooperation. The 2025 crisis replayed that lesson on a larger, more confrontational scale. With no legal recourse, the U.S. couldn't demand Canada stand down. The issue was about political will and leverage, not international law. The Trump administration had to face the reality. Only diplomacy and compromise could resolve the standoff. While leaders argued, Alaskans paid the price. Trucking costs soared, delays mounted, and prices for essentials like milk and produce spiked. Store shelves emptied as supply chains buckled. Small businesses and the oil industry faced costly disruptions and uncertainty. The state's economic stability was suddenly at risk, fueling anxiety and frustration. Alaskans felt powerless, caught between U.S. trade policy and Canada's firm response. Many believed their unique vulnerability was being ignored by Washington. The crisis was a harsh reminder: Alaska's fate is tied to forces far beyond its borders. Canada publicly framed its actions as overdue regulatory reforms, not retaliation. Officials cited environmental concerns and the rights of indigenous communities along the highway. The trade dispute gave political cover to act on these issues, blending domestic policy with international leverage. Canada positioned itself as principled, defending both the environment and Indigenous rights. But beneath the rhetoric was a clear message. Canadian sovereignty is non-negotiable. By targeting Alaska's vulnerability, Canada showed it had powerful tools to defend its interests. The velvet glove of regulation hid the iron fist of national self-defense. President Trump responded with a rhetorical offensive, framing Canada's actions as a disgraceful blockade. He painted Trudeau as a betrayer and dismissed Canada's justifications as lies. The narrative energized his base, casting the crisis as a fight for American sovereignty. Trump's approach made compromise harder, inflaming tensions and hardening positions. Each fiery speech raised the political cost of backing down. The crisis became a battle of national pride, prolonging Alaskans' pain. Trump's words turned a solvable dispute into a high-stakes standoff. Away from the spotlight, diplomats from both countries worked quietly to resolve the crisis. Public posturing masked real negotiations behind the scenes. Both sides knew a prolonged rupture would be disastrous. Canada's measures were bargaining chips, not permanent policy. The likely compromise: the U.S. would drop tariff threats, and Canada would lift tolls and inspections. The crisis revealed Canada's leverage and forced Washington to recalibrate its approach. The Alaska Highway standoff was a stress test for the U.S.-Canada partnership. It's a warning. Even the closest alliances can't be taken for granted. Thanks for watching a video. Subscribe the channel now for more updates. Thanks.